Okay, welcome students. Myself Prakash Chandra Paricha, Head of the Department of Zoology, Ramadevi Women's University, Bhubaneswar. Today we will discuss some disorders related to kidney. In the last class, we started renal failure. Renal failure or kidney failure means both the kidneys they stop functioning. When the kidneys stop functioning, there will be retention of water, nitrogenous waste materials in the body, there will be salt imbalance, and it will lead to a life threatening condition. If the patient or such an individual is not given proper medical care, then within a couple of weeks the individual will die. A patient with renal failure can undergo kidney transplantation. The long lasting solution to renal failure is kidney transplantation. In kidney transplantation, a kidney is collected from a donor, a suitable donor, then it is transplanted in the body of the patient whose kidneys are damaged. But this process of kidney transplantation is very expensive, and also finding a suitable donor is not easy. So, when a kidney donor is not available, or till the time kidney transplantation is not done, to save the life of that individual must undergo a process that is called dialysis. Dialysis is a medical procedure where the blood is filtered. The blood is filtered to get rid of the unwanted materials from the blood. That process is known as dialysis. There are two types of dialysis. One is hemodialysis, the other is peritoneal dialysis. When dialysis is done with the help of a kidney machine, it is called hemodialysis. Dialysis with the help of kidney machine is called hemodialysis. Kidney machine is also known as artificial kidney. This artificial kidney works on the same principle as real kidney, and it helps in removing the unwanted substances from the blood. Now, we will see how this hemodialysis or dialysis with artificial kidney is done. So, this diagram shows the process of hemodialysis. Here the patient is connected to the dialysis machine. The patient is connected to machine with the help of a catheter. The catheter is a hollow needle. One end of the catheter is inserted into an artery either of arm or of leg. So, one end of the catheter is inserted into the artery of arm or leg, and the other end is connected to a plastic tube, and that plastic tube leads into the dialysis machine. Suppose this is the dialysis machine. You can see here, here there will be catheter and it is connected to this plastic pipe. So, from the artery blood is drawn gently, and here a pump is fitted, and blood is gently pumped out from the body of the patient from the artery. Then it is made to circulate through dialysis tubing. You can see here there is a dialysis tubing. These tubes, in these tubes the blood is made to circulate. When blood flows in this these tubings, the blood is filtered. The wall of the dialysis tubes, they are made of artificial semi-permeable membrane. Those artificial semi-permeable membrane allow water, ions and small molecules to diffuse through them. This chamber where the dialysis tubings they are present is filled with a dialysis fluid. After filtration, the blood is returned to a vein. This is the vein which returns blood to the body. Here there is a bubble trap. This is the chamber where the dialysis tubing is present, and the dialysis tubings they are bathed by this dialysis fluid. Here in this machine there is such arrangement that through one inlet fresh dialysis fluid enters the chamber. Here this is a tank which contains fresh dialysis fluid. Then it is made to flow through a constant temperature bath, and that dialysis fluid then enters this chamber. Then the used dialysis fluid comes out through this outlet, and that is collected here. So, when the blood is circulating in this dialysis tubing bathed by this dialysis fluid, there will be exchange of material. The materials which need to be removed from the blood, that is the waste material, their concentration should be 0 in the dialysis fluid. Those substances which are to be retained in the blood, their concentration should be same both in the blood and in the dialysis fluid. So, here the dialysis fluid is very important. In this process of dialysis, the dialysis fluid is very important. Its pH, its ionic concentration, its temperature, these things are very important. So, when the blood circulates in this dialysis tubing, the unwanted materials are filtered out from the blood into this dialysis fluid, and then that dialysis fluid is collected here. After the blood is filtered, the filtered blood is then returned to the body through a vein. So, this is the process of hemodialysis or dialysis using kidney machine. This process takes about 4 to 6 hours. A patient who has both the kidneys damaged must undergo this process twice or thrice in a week. Then the second dialysis method, that is peritoneal dialysis. Peritoneal dialysis is dialysis using a natural membrane rather than artificial membrane. Here in peritoneal dialysis, a natural semi-permeable membrane of the patient is used for separating the waste materials from the blood. In peritoneal dialysis, what is done? A small slit-like opening is made in the wall of the abdominal cavity, and through that small slit-like opening, a plastic tube is inserted into the abdominal cavity. That abdominal cavity is lined by peritoneum. So, the abdominal cavity is lined by peritoneum, which acts like a dialysis membrane. Through that plastic tubing which has been inserted into the abdominal cavity, dialysis fluid is added to the abdominal cavity. Then there will be exchange of material between that dialysis fluid and the tissue fluid which is present in the abdomen. So, the dialysis fluid will collect the waste materials from the blood. That dialysis fluid must be replaced 3 or 4 times a day. Compared to hemodialysis, this process is simple and also less expensive. Also, this process is convenient. Peritoneal dialysis is convenient because when dialysis is on, the patient can move about, and the patient can go about his or her routine work. But the problem with peritoneal dialysis is that there is a chance of dangerous infection. This peritoneal dialysis is also known as continuous ambulatory peritoneal dialysis because when the process is on, the patient can move about. Ambulatory means moving about. So, these were the two dialysis methods. Then another kidney disorder is uremia. Uremia occurs when the kidneys are damaged. In uremia, the urea and creatinine content in the blood increases. If it is untreated, then it will create a life-threatening situation. Uremia is a major symptom of renal failure. The symptoms of uremia are extreme tiredness, then loss of appetite, cramping in legs, nausea, vomiting. So, these are the symptoms of uremia. Uremia is caused by high blood pressure, high blood sugar, certain types of cancer, then bacterial infection, also by inflammation of the kidneys, by formation of kidney stones. These are some of the causes which are responsible for uremia. Then another kidney disease is nephritis. Nephritis is inflammation of the kidney. It may involve inflammation of the glomeruli or inflammation of the interstitial tissue that is present between the renal tubules, or inflammation of the tubule. Nephritis is of these three types. One is known as glomerulonephritis or chronic nephritis. In glomerulonephritis, there is inflammation of the glomeruli of the kidney tubules. This glomerulonephritis is often caused by infection, toxin, or because of autoimmune disorder. When there is inflammation of the interstitial tissue that is present between the nephrons or the kidney tubules, it is known as interstitial nephritis or tubulointerstitial nephritis. This type of nephritis is caused by increased concentration of potassium ions in blood, or because of use of medicines that damage kidney tissues. Then the third type is pyelonephritis. Pyelonephritis is caused by E. coli infection. Escherichia coli or E. coli is a bacterium. When these bacteria infect kidney or the urinary bladder, there will be inflammation of the tubules leading to pyelonephritis. The symptoms of nephritis are pelvic pain, burning sensation during urination, appearance of blood in urine, then swelling in leg, feet and face. The patient may also experience nausea and vomiting. Then finally, this disorder renal calculi or kidney stones. Renal calculi, its alternate names are nephrolithiasis or urolithiasis. So, all these terms they refer to the same disorder. In renal calculi or kidney stones, there will be formation of hard crystalline material in the kidney. These hard crystalline materials are usually found in the kidney, but they may also form either in ureter, urethra or urinary bladder. The kidney stones are the solid crystalline substances which are found in renal calculi. They are composed of minerals and salts. There are different types of kidney stones. These are the four types of kidney stones or renal calculi. The most common is calcium stones. These stones are composed of calcium oxalate. This type of stones are most common, and these are formed by consumption of foods that are rich in oxalate. Some of the foods which are rich in oxalates are potato chips, beet, peanuts, spinach. By avoiding these oxalate rich foods, formation of this type of stones can be avoided, or the risk of having this type of stone can be reduced. Then the second type of stone is uric acid stone. Usually this type of stone develops in women. When urine is too acidic, these uric acid stones are formed. Consumption of purine rich food like fish, shellfish, and meat. Fish, shellfish, meat, these are purine rich food. By cutting down on these purine rich food, one can reduce the risk of having uric acid stones. Then the third type of stone is known as struvite. This type of stone is also mostly found in case of women when there is urinary tract infection. Usually these stones are bigger in size. Finally, cystine stone. Cystine, this substance is formed from amino acid cysteine. This cysteine is an oxidized dimer of amino acid cysteine. This type of stone is rare, and this type of stone occurs in individuals with genetic disorder. So, these are the 4 types of stones which can be found. Then its symptoms. When there is a kidney stone, one will experience severe and sharp pain in the sides and back below the ribs. There will be burning sensation at the time of urination. The pain comes in waves and the intensity of pain also fluctuates. The presence of renal calculi or kidney stone can be detected through blood test, urine test or imaging. Imaging like ultrasound. Ultrasound or CT or computerized tomography can detect presence of kidney stones. These kidney stones usually occur when the urine contains crystal forming substances like say calcium, oxalate and uric acid. Also when there is a deficiency of those substances which prevent sticking together of the crystal forming substances. When the kidney stone is small in size, it can be removed from the body by taking plenty of water, by using medicine to get relief from pain, and also medicines are available which will make the passing out of the stone from the body in a smooth manner and also quickly. So, by taking plenty of water, using a painkiller and medication to remove the small stones, one can get relief from these kidney stones. But when the kidney stone is bigger in size, surgery might be required, or using sound waves, the kidney stone can be broken into pieces, and those small pieces then can pass out in urine, or they can be flushed out. Or a ureteroscope can be used. A ureteroscope is a thin hollow tube with light and camera. With the help of ureteroscope, the kidney stone is located, then it is broken into pieces so that it can come out of the body. So, these were some of the disorders related to kidney. Next, we will discuss locomotion and movement. Movement is change of position, displacement or change of position of body part of the organism or of the whole organism. So, movement means change of position of body part of an organism or change of position of the whole organism. When there is a change of position of the whole organism, we call it locomotion. The organism or the animal moves from one place to another. Movement is an important characteristic of living organisms, and locomotion is a characteristic feature of animals. Almost all the animals, they are capable of locomotion, that is movement from place to place. In animals, different types of movement can be seen. The movement can be amoeboid movement, it can be ciliary movement, it can be flagellar movement, or it can be muscular movement. So, these are some of the different types of movements exhibited by animals. Amoeboid movement, this is a movement by formation of temporary structures. Leukocytes or white blood cells, they are capable of this type of movement or amoeboid movement. In amoeboid movement, the cell it forms temporary cytoplasmic extensions, which are known as pseudopodia. Singular is pseudopodium. So, by putting out temporary cytoplasmic processes called pseudopodia, this cell moves. White blood cells or leukocytes, they can move by putting out pseudopodia. Movement with the help of pseudopodia is known as amoeboid movement. It is named amoeboid movement after the movement in amoeba. In amoeba is a single celled organism and it can move by forming pseudopodia. Then the second type of movement is ciliary movement. Movement with the help of cilia is known as ciliary movement. Cilia are small, fine, hair-like structures. Suppose these are some cells. You can see here the cells at this end, they have fine hair-like structures. These small fine hair-like structures are called cilia. The cells with cilia are known as ciliated cells. These ciliated cells are found in certain parts of your body. For example, these ciliated cells, they are found lining the cavity of the brain. As you know, brain is a hollow structure. Inside brain, cavities are present, and those cavities are lined by ciliated epithelium or epithelial cells having this type of cilia. Ciliated epithelium is also present in oviduct. Or the fallopian tube, which transports the eggs from ovary to the uterus. Then respiratory tract is also provided with these cilia. Lining of the respiratory tract is ciliated epithelium. These cilia are capable of moving substances or materials. Usually, these ciliated cells are found in association with mucus secreting cells. The mucus secreting cells are known as goblet cells. Suppose here in this diagram, this is a goblet cell and it secretes mucus. So, these ciliated cells or the cilia, they can move materials across their surface. Suppose consider the ciliated epithelium lining the trachea or the windpipe. Through the windpipe, air enters our body or it goes through the lungs. The air might be carrying dust or foreign particles. If dust and foreign particles are there, then here they are trapped in the mucus. Goblet cells will be there along with the ciliated cells. The mucus is a sticky substance, a thick substance. In the mucus, the dust particle, suppose this is dust particle, it will be trapped in the mucus. Then by beating of cilia, it can be moved away. The dust particle trapped in the mucus by the coordinated beating of the cilia, it can be moved towards the throat region or it can be moved away. So, this is a ciliary movement in the trachea. Similarly, by ciliary movement, by action of cilia, the female gamete or the egg moves in the oviduct. Then flagellar movement. Flagellum is a long thread-like structure or a whip-like structure. Movement with the help of flagella is known as flagellar movement. In our body, sperm cells have flagella. Suppose this is a human sperm. Sperm has two parts, head and this tail. This tail is also known as flagellum. This flagellum, in its basic structure, it is similar to cilium, but it is much longer. A cell may bear several cilia. Usually, a cell bears a large number of cilia, but when it comes to flagellum, a cell usually bears one flagellum. Here you can see this is a human sperm cell and it has a long thread-like structure that is known as flagellum. This sperm is capable of movement. It can swim in a fluid medium. This flagellum, by vibration of this flagellum, this sperm can move. And finally, we have muscular movement or movement with the help of muscles. Muscles bring about movement and locomotion. Muscles, they are generally of three types. So, these are the three types of muscles which are found in our body: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle. Smooth muscles, they are found in the wall of hollow internal organs. For example, they are found in the wall of intestine, they are found in the wall of stomach. These muscles, they are involuntary in nature. Their contraction is not under our will. So, they are involuntary muscles and they appear smooth without any stripes or bending pattern. That is why they are called smooth muscles. Smooth muscles, they help in movement of material in the body. For example, we have a digestive tract. In the digestive tract, food moves from one part to another part by the action of the smooth muscles which are present in the wall of the alimentary canal. By the contraction and relaxation of the smooth muscles, food propagates or it moves in the alimentary canal. Then cardiac muscles. These cardiac muscles are found in the wall of heart only, not elsewhere. Then these cardiac muscles, they also help in moving materials. You know that heart acts like a pumping organ. When the cardiac muscles contract, blood is pumped out of the heart. It is pumped to different parts of the body through the blood vessels. So, you can see here the cardiac muscles, they are helping or they bring about the movement of the blood. Then finally, skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles, they are found in association with skeletal structures. These skeletal muscles are responsible for locomotion. These are voluntary muscles. These are called voluntary muscles because their contraction is under our will. These skeletal muscles are also known as striped muscles. These are called striped muscles because they show alternate dark and light stripes or bending pattern. So, these are the three types of muscles which are found in our body, and they bring about movement, and the skeletal muscles, they bring about locomotion. All the muscles, they have certain properties. The muscles are electrically excitable. They are electrically excitable means when a muscle is stimulated, it will generate electric signal. That electric signal is called action potential. Like nerve cells, these muscle cells are also capable of generating action potential. So, when a muscle is stimulated, it can generate electrical signal which is known as muscle action potential. Another property is contractility. A muscle cell or muscle can contract. Contract means decrease in length. A muscle cell can decrease in length. On receiving appropriate stimulus, a muscle can undergo contraction or its length may decrease. That is called contraction, or it is the contractile ability. A muscle is capable of extensibility. That means a muscle can be extended. Within limits, it can be stretched. Its length can be increased without causing damage to the muscle. Finally, muscle has elasticity. When a muscle contracts or when it is extended, it can come back to its original length and shape. This property is known as elasticity. So, these are the characteristic features or properties of a muscle or muscle fiber. Now, we will see the structure of a skeletal muscle fiber. As I have already told you, skeletal muscle is called so because it is always found in association with skeletal structures. You can see here, this is a skeletal muscle. A skeletal muscle is composed of a large number of skeletal muscle cells. Muscle cells are usually called muscle fibers. Muscle cells are called muscle fibers because of their elongated shape. They are thread like elongated in shape, that is why muscle cells are known as muscle fibers. This is a skeletal muscle. A skeletal muscle is composed of a large number of muscle fibers. A skeletal muscle is attached to bone at least at two places. A skeletal muscle is attached to bone or periosteum of bone. A bone is externally covered by a connective tissue sheath, a tough connective tissue sheath that is known as periosteum. Here this is suppose a bone, the outer covering is periosteum, and this muscle is attached to the bone with the help of a rope like structure called tendon. This tendon is composed of collagen fibers. The muscle is protected by connective tissue sheath. That connective tissue sheath which covers it and also supports it is known as epimysium. This is a dense irregular connective tissue which covers and protects the muscle. In this muscle, a number of muscle fibers are present. In the muscle fibers or the muscle cells, they are arranged in groups. You can see here, these are the groups of muscle fibers. Each muscle fiber group is known as a fascicle. In each fascicle, there will be 10 to 100 muscle fibers. So, in a muscle, the muscle fibers, they are arranged in groups, and this group is a group of muscle fibers is known as a fascicle. This fascicle is surrounded by another connective tissue covering that is known as perimysium. As I have already told you, within the fascicle there will be the muscle fibers. Each muscle fiber is again surrounded by another connective tissue membrane that is known as endomysium. So, this is how the muscle fibers they are arranged in a muscle.